This is William Ozier. Please feel free to call me Wes, presenting my story, The Bucky Truck, which was entered and won into the Stories to Change the World 2020 contest. Stories to Change the World was started by Alexis M. Thompson in 2016, and to view the whole story and to find out more about the publishing, please visit alexismercedes.com/STCW3. Now presenting my story. The Bucky Truck by Wes Ozier. It was time. The sun was up, the dew was dry, the birds were flying. Sunlight fell onto a vehicle. The exterior of the vehicle was a geodesic framework with all of the capsules and engines held inside the frame. It had 4 large, thin wheels. The roof of the vehicle was covered with a living roof garden of short grass and small, colorful flowers. Bees and butterflies flitted about them. A plaque on the vehicle displayed the icon of swooshing green lines. The biggest word on the plaque was Bucky Truck. Beneath the name was written the tagline, Local Nutrient and Resource Recycling. The Bucky Truck was parked alongside several other similar vehicles. At each Bucky Truck, a team of 2 walked around the truck, kicking the tires, looking in hatches, reading digital control panels here and there. The driver of this particular truck sat alone in the cab. He flipped the switch and the electric engine hummed to life. A few hissing noises, thumps, and a soft humming noise, and the Bucky Truck, as it was called, was ready. The driver gave a look at the clock hologram projected onto the windshield, as if looking at it longer would change what time it actually was. He looked at the empty seat next to him, looked out the driver's side window. Unsurprising, of the people in the central lot, none of them were his partner running over to him late. He thought about his day, determination etched onto his face. He pressed his foot down on the throttle, and with a pneumatic hiss, the Bucky Truck began driving forward. The Bucky Truck was now parked in front of a beautiful, handcrafted cob home surrounded by a thick orchard of fruit trees. Several children ran around laughing. The Bucky Truck was parked directly next to a group of barrels all piped together. A small hose was pumping fuel into the truck. The driver and the resident of the home had their sleeves rolled up and were throwing logs into the open container of the truck. The logs were all soft and nearly falling apart. They were covered in all sorts of mushroom and fungus growths. The driver called up a menu on a small digital control panel next to the open container. He scrolled down until he found the code for hugelkultur inputs. Plus, I'm going to add those fungal growths as a separate resource, get you a better return ratio that way. Add it to the fuel input, you should be good. The resident smiled. Thanks. The control panel beat back a number followed by 3 little letters. The driver hit the button. With a soft hiss, a small door thumped close. 2 little clunk noises, and the door hissed back open. The container was now empty and even seemed sanitized and sparkling clean. The resident stepped up, pressed a few buttons on the control panel. She looked it over for a few seconds and then made an excited little ooh and pressed buttons. The doors closed, and a few hisses and thunks later, the door opened. There was a burlap bag filled with soft, loamy compost, a bundle of wooden rods held together in a burlap rack, and a plastic container full of compartmentalized seeds. A few pleasantries later, and the Bucky Truck wheels hissed, spun on the compressed dirt road, and the truck zoomed off down the little road back to disappear into the orchard. A left curve here, a right curve there, and the compressed dirt road became a road composed of clay tiles, each imprinted with a handprint filled in with driven down dirt pressed into it, and grass poking up here and there. To tell the truth, he really didn't have to drive all that far to the next residence on his route. It was the type of distance his grandmother used to call down the block, a phrase he never quite understood. A few curves later, and the road became cobblestone. Thanks to the magnetic suspension on the Bucky's wheels, the ride was smooth as always. Thanks to the fact that the driver was being impatient and pushing the throttle, the Bucky bounced more than it should. The next residence was obviously a prefab home. It looked like a traditional suburban home. There was a small red barn behind it. The resident of this home was shoving an overly large straw bale into the truck's bin. Why don't they get you one of those new trucks? The driver ran around the outside and tightened down a bolt on one of the connectors on the truck's geodesic frame. No way, man. This was hand-built with love. None of those printed vehicles for me. The resident removed 2 large burlap bags full of compost from the truck, balancing a plastic container full of seeds on top. Where's your partner? Don't they always send 2 on a route? The driver was moving back around to hop into the truck. Last I saw him, he jumped into his bike car and pedaled off to a reggae festival. Some children ran up and were trying to work together to carry off the bags of compost. The resident looked over the seeds in the container. I'm surprised they didn't get you a fallback. Plenty of folks want to drive a Bucky Truck. As the driver hopped through the frame and into the cab of the vehicle, he laughed. Shh, I didn't tell anyone. I'm covering for him. The next house in the route was a simple corrugated steel residence. Most of the surrounding field was filled with solar panels. The Bucky truck was plugged into the array and charging up. As the truck powered up, the control panel display showed the official conversion of electric power into biomass. The resident was standing next to the open container, holding a big box of random cut-up plastic. The driver was looking at the box of plastic cutting, asking, "What's this? Why didn't you process any of this?" The resident was awkwardly holding the box. "Well, don't you got a processor on your Bucky?" The driver pointed at the corrugated steel building. "No, you can print out an entire house with your setup, and you don't have a processor in that whole thing?" The resident harumphed and got indignant. "A processor? No, I don't need one. I only use prepared plastic. I'm not putting scraps into my system." The Bucky hissed on down a road cut through a small thicket of woods. The driver was looking at the clock and doing math in his head. He was pushing the speed past what was safe for this type of terrain. The collision warning beeped every once in a while. He looked at the empty seat next to him and then at the clock. He gave himself a satisfied grin and kept on. The next resident was holding a small cardboard box filled with fish wrapped in tissue paper. It reeked of dead fish. The driver had his hands up as if being robbed. "I'm sorry, but if you have an infection in your aquaponics, I can't take those." The resident fussed. "But that's where I get 80% of my nutrients, and I need a new stock of fish." "But I can't exchange for infected biomass. It could spread to the whole truck." "Look, I'll report it and see if I can get a specialist out to fix it for you." "All right, in the meantime, I know somebody on this route got a pretty large aquaponics set up. I'll see if they can bike you down some guppies later." The resident hung his head dejected. The driver gave a defeated harumph. All right, tell you what. Let's grab some rakes, sweep up some of your yard cleanings, and throw them in and weigh them. If I do that, I can at least get you a seed exchange. It just won't come with the fertilizer mass." They worked as fast as they could. It gave enough time for a steady stream of bees and butterflies to circulate from the garden on top of the truck with the landscaping around the resident's house. He was pushing the throttle again. The wheels hugged the terrain of an all-dirt road, no kind of paving whatsoever. The driver's face was skewering into a rictus of annoyance when suddenly a flock of birds descended down onto his Bucky. The small flock clamped onto the geodesic frame and hung on for a ride. The birds all started singing and whistling. The driver couldn't help it. He was trying to be annoyed, but instead began whistling along with their singing, his Bucky skidding along the dirt path. It was approaching sunset when the Bucky truck pulled back into Central Lot. The driver stopped on the scale that weighed the vehicle. The foreman told the driver that the total weight was off, but another truck was over, so they could just balance them out. The Bucky truck hissed one final hiss for the night. The driver hopped out of his Bucky truck and onto his own bike car. Tired but satisfied with the job well done, he pedaled off in search of his own reggae festival, even if just for one night. After all, tomorrow was another day on the route. The end.